Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I am here with another 6x6 paper pad card making video. And last time I made 10 cards with the 6x6 pad, but today I'm going to make 24 cards with this one 6x6 pad from Doodlebug called Easter Express. And what I absolutely love about the Doodlebug pads, besides the fact that they are like ridiculously adorable, is that you can make a whole stack of cards with just the 6x6 pad and some cardstock and adhesive. You don't need extra supplies, you don't need stamps, you don't need images, you don't need sentiments. It's all right there in the pad. And so as I flip through the pad, what you can see is I'm taking out anything with those little cut aparts, and also there's always going to be a large design that's like a, in the 12x12 it's like the full sheet. It's the same with the 6x6. So I'll talk about how I'm going to use all of those, but basically there are 4 of each design and there are 24 papers in all. So that means that there is 6 different papers. And so there I have my first design, which is going to be with the large image. Like I said, that's about 6x6, but I thought that was a little too big for a card. I wanted to trim it. So I basically cut my cardstock to 5.5 by 5.5. So you could take a regular 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock and cut it on the 8.5 side to 5.5. And then when you fold it in half, it'll be a 5.5 by 5.5 card. And then what I'm going to do is take this 6x6 sheet and cut it to 5.25 by 5.25. And that's going to take a little bit of that edging off. I'll still leave that frame. There's sort of like a rainbow plaid frame around it. But I just wanted the card to be slightly smaller. And what I intend to do with these cards, like I do with a lot of my cards, is to donate them to organizations like Cards for Hospitalized Kids. And so if they're different sizes, it doesn't matter for that particular organization. And so basically you could just kind of leave it be. It's such an adorable little scene, but I wanted to show you some ways to jazz it up. And like I said, you can make cards with absolutely no extras. But here I'm going to use a handful of things that are sort of like basic replaceable supplies. So I have this really cool snow marker, and it basically puffs up when heated. So I will link it in the video description, but it's from Marvi Uchida, or Uchida, I'm not quite sure how to say it. But you just sort of dab it on, and I'm putting this on the smoke of the train and the smoke of the house. And then I'm going to take a heat gun to it, and it's going to cause it to puff up and add a little bit of texture. And this is just because I thought, well, since it was such a simple card where I basically just glued a piece of paper to a card base, I thought, well, I should probably just, jazz it up a little bit. And what you might have already noticed is that because there are 4 of each sheet, what I'm basically going to do is create 4 of each card that I come up with today. And I like that because it uses up most of the paper pad in one go, and there's no real waste. You'll see at the end how very little I have left. And there were 24 sheets of pattern paper in the paper pad, so I'm going to try to make 24 cards, but I'm going to cut up a lot of them, so you'll see how that goes in the end. So I took some glossy accents and added them to the jelly beans in the tree just for a little bit extra there. And then I'm going to take a pink journaling pen, although really any kind of pen will do, and just add a bit of stitching around the edges. And I'm going to do this on a couple of the cards. Take the same pink pen and just add faux stitching. And that's basically just little lines. Anyone can do it. And it just adds a little level of extra detail. But I really just wanted to kind of try to keep it to paper as much as possible, so you don't feel like you have to have this huge stamp collection or huge die collection to make really awesome cards. So, and then here it is with the glossy accents. This I'm just using the regular old bottle of glossy accents. You don't need the fancy fine tip. I have one, and there are some purposes that I like it, but it does still clog just like the regular tip. So be aware of that. You can always have a sewing needle on hand to poke that out. And then if you do choose to try to like unclog it, I would suggest squeezing it on a scrap piece of paper to make sure it's flowing before you bring it to your project. So now I have those little stacks of the rest of the papers in the collection, not the cut aparts. and they are kind of like binded together at the top because they're in the paper pad, and I'm going to cut each of them to 4 by 5 1/4, which will give me just a little 1/4 inch border around a standard A2 size card. So these are basically going to be like my card bases, but they'll be glued onto a card base, and it makes it a little bit easier to cut them right now because they're in a stack, and so then I can make really quick work of this. I was able to make 24 cards in, like, I would say maybe like 2 hours because of how easy it was to design with these. So here I have the 3 different pattern papers ready to go in card base sizes, and then I have all my scraps. It creates a 2-inch by 6-inch scrap of all those, and so you can see that there, and then those little tiny scraps are like 3/4 of an inch by 4 inches. And so I just kind of like laid out the little scraps, and then I have cut apart all of the little symbols and images and journaling cards and sentiments, etc., etc. And I chose to only cut apart some of them because some of the little sentiments, because they're really hard to trim since they're so tiny. But then the more like journaling card ones, like the Happy Easter and here's a little bunny on the eggs, those I cut apart all up. But those little tiny sentiments are like really hard to trim down. I recommend like maybe trying scissors instead to cut them apart, because when I tried it with my big guillotine paper trimmer, it didn't work very well, and I kept kind of like messing them up. But I picked a handful of sentiments that I thought I liked. You know, here I'm just kind of like playing with all the little pieces to get myself thinking. I thought, well, you know, like I really, really want to use that little bunny on the train image. And so I thought, okay, which of those little sentiment strips can I pair with it? Make sure I have 4 of it so that when I come up with a card design, I can whip out 4 of them right away. And this is great if you have a bunch of family members you need to make cards for and it's okay for you to duplicate, or you keep one of them for friends and family and then donate the rest. And that might be what I do with them. So for my first card design, I picked out one of the card base pieces and one of the 2-inch strips. What's nice about these 2-inch strips is they make perfect little layering pieces where you can either cut a banner like I just did. I made a banner edge with them. Or you can make them a whole strip down the card to kind of like anchor a sentiment or an image. And so that's what I chose to do here. I decided to go with the banner this time, and sometimes I'll mix it up and just keep it straight across. And I like to just kind of play with the patterns a lot. Some of the patterns only go one way or the other. In this particular paper pad, there's like a bunch of little chicks on one or bunnies on one, and they kind of like, you know, you can't use it both ways because then the bunnies look like they're standing on their side. And so I consider that, you know, pair it up next to a few different of the pattern papers that are choices and see which one I like best. And then there I use that little blue strip to kind of help ground the whole thing a bit more. And I'm sorry if you can hear some like phone noises in the background. I have tried to turn it off now so it does not disturb the video anymore. But here I'm going to go in again with that same pink pen detail. So I figured if I use the pink pen on one card, I should use it again so you can see how even one little supply like that can add detail to a bunch of different cards. And so I put that along that blue strip. And I thought the blue strip added a good detail because that pattern paper was so busy. Pairing the more solid paper next to the sentiment kind of, you know, helped ground it a bit. So here again, I decided I really want to use this adorable little train image. Now let me turn it and put it on every little, you know, of the different background choices. Let me try this strip or that strip till I come up with something I like. And I wanted to show all of this process because I wanted people to see what it's like to trying to come up with these designs. Like I'm not using any sketches. I'm not using anything other than just like playing around with it. And I think that we can encourage ourselves to just sort of have a play with paper. That's kind of the point of our hobby, is to just have fun with it. So all I do is just, you know, kind of put the image on a bunch of different pattern papers. Which do I like? Or put the 2 pattern papers together and see which one. But a tip, if you find yourself feeling a little bit uncomfortable with doing that, is you'll generally want to pair a more solid pattern paper with the busy pattern paper. You obviously don't want to put two busy pattern papers together. So generally, paper companies do a pretty good job of making your job easy with this, that the pattern papers, these are double-sided papers, that the pattern on the opposite side coordinates really well with the other one. So if you take the, if you cut it into two pieces, the 2-inch strip and the 4-inch strip, then you can kind of reverse it and layer it together, and they generally look pretty good. In this case, I chose the For You sentiment, just to keep it simple and make it sure it worked for Easter. And I'm going to pair the plaid background with this green, and you can't really tell from the video, but there is little tiny bunnies on this. Perhaps if you make it bigger, you'll be able to see those little bunnies there. But I'm going to kind of treat that bunny paper as more of a solid because there's so much green, and pair it with this really busy rainbowy plaid background. And I'm going to create it as a strip this time. I'm not going to cut that banner edge in there. And then I'll give you a tip for that banner edge because I'm going to use it in another card. This whole time I am using a ATG gun from Scotch. That's something that you can get at any big box craft store. Again, not a fancy tool. As I said, I wanted to limit the amount of extras you needed. And you could, again, use that snow marker to get a little bit of detail on the puff clouds of the train here. I chose not to because it's blue and the marker is white, but I think that it would look pretty cute as well. And then as I was laying this together, I was thinking, I want to use some of these little extra strips here that were created from cutting it to 4 by 5 1/4, so it leaves that 3/4 inch strip. I'm like, I want to use some of those. I want to use some of this extra paper. And when I went to put that little tiny strip of plaid on it, I was like, I don't like that I'm using the plaid in the background and then the plaid again on a strip. So I simply turned the plaid paper over, and it was this blue pattern on the back. And this blue pattern has like really subtle monochromatic detail on it. Like there's all kinds of like bunnies and chicks drawn on it, but it's blue on blue, so it looks mostly solid. And I liked that a lot better. I didn't want too much of the same pattern on the paper. And so now I'm going to have 4 different patterns on this paper, which is like a lot of pattern, which might be kind of scary to some people because, mixing patterns can be really challenging. However, because Doodlebug has kind of done the work for you, the designers who know a lot about how patterns mix have mixed these patterns together. It works a lot better than you might think it will, and you don't have to be afraid to sort of like mix patterns that are a little bit crazy together because they are perfectly coordinated. The greens match exactly the greens, or the pinks exactly match the other pinks. So I definitely encourage you to explore. But as you see there, I didn't like what I had, and rather than freak out or throw the card away, I just very carefully peeled it off. And if it hadn't peeled off, that would have been fine, and I would have left that one a little bit busier than the others and then made the rest of them with this blue paper. But what's nice is when I make a design and I come up with this, like I like this green strip with this other pattern strip on the blue paper, when I come up with this design, I get to make it 4 times, and I get to make a whole bunch of cards that way. So if you prefer making a bunch of cards with your paper to kind of use it up, to spread the love, to enjoy your craft more, then these pads are great, and you can save yourself a lot of hassle while you make one nice card that you really love, and then you can reproduce it a couple of times because this paper pad has 4 of each design. Whereas if you had a unique piece of paper every time, you'd start from scratch every time you design a card. So that is one more card with that bunny train that just had to be used because it's just so cute. And I am ready for another card. I am, however, running out of these 5 1/4 by 4 background papers. This is my last set, so I'm going to have to get creative soon. But here I'm cutting the banners, and as you see, I like to cut down the center first and then in from the edges. I find that allows me to guarantee that it looks a little more uniform and less lopsided. If I try to cut from the side first. Sometimes like one of the sides winds up bigger and it's all wonky like. So cutting down the center is my suggestion. So because I only had these last two pieces left, and they were actually backs of each other. The chicks are on the back of the flower paper here. I didn't really have a lot of options. I kind of just had to go with it. And it's a little bit busier than I'd like because of the, the really small chicks on the really small flowers. So it's two pretty busy patterns. But I think that it, again, it looks okay because they're meant to go together. But also I used a like little journaling piece, that little bunny piece. I don't know what you really call those, but I know they're meant to be journaling cards in the bigger ones, like Project Life journaling cards, but they're not when they're small. I thought, well, because that one's a little bit more solid, maybe it works. So now, basically all I have left is these little cut-aparts. I have square ones and rectangle ones and strips and just those. I have no more big pieces of pattern paper left. And I've already made 3 different card designs times 4, so 12, plus another 4 of that large design. So I've already made 16 cards out of this paper pack, which is pretty good. But I have these whole, these stacks of these adorable little journaling cards that I really want to use. And so I tried to come up with a way to use them. And basically what I found is that you could make little grids of them. And if you pair one of the large rectangles with 2 of the squares, then you have a little bit of extra room and you can fill it in with the strips. And so by just, again, all I did was take the little pieces that I had and play with them, move them about, see what works. So I encourage you to just have that play with them. But now that you know, 2 squares and 1 rectangle fit on a slightly smaller square card, that'll help you as a guide, and you can think about which ones you're using and which ones you want to save for these last cards at the end. But basically, I am cutting the card to a square card. Normally, A2 is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. These are 4 1/4 by 4 1/4. And because I'm not perfect, all the squares are not perfectly the same size. Some of them are a little bit wider than others as I trim them. And so what you can do is if you want to make sure your 2 squares are exactly the same size, since you're going to stack them on top of each other, then you can hold them up to each other and trim off the excess on one of them that has excess. But then, maybe you're also really good at cutting straight and you don't have that problem. But here I wanted to show you all the cards that I've created so far. I'm up to 20 cards, and I thought, what, I did great. I added this little pen detail to the edges again, just because I was like, well, if I use the pink pen, let me, use it a handful more times, add a little detail to these cards. And I'm still thinking, I still have a pile of these cut-aparts, and they weren't my favorite cut-aparts. I've used all of my favorite ones. I kind of have, either not, they're all cute, but some of them were just a little bit less like a Easter card to me, in the sense that they didn't have a sentiment. They had something that would be more appropriate for scrapbooking. Hippity Hoppity, Easter's on its way isn't quite a sentiment, but can work for one. Or the one that just says hop, hop, hop is really white, and so it doesn't work as well on that last style of card where it's going to be surrounded by white. So, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, so I stopped and I added all this stitching detail to the different cards that I'd done. I'd added it around the little bunny egg and around that other grid card, and I keep thinking to myself, okay, so what am I going to do with these last little bits of grid? Do I just get rid of them? Do I just toss them and call it a day? And you can, and you don't have to feel guilty about it, because there's 20 cards already out of one 6x6 pad. I don't know about you, but that rarely happens for me, where I get to make all 20, make 20 cards out of one pad. So, I thought, well, let me just experiment a little bit. So I have this A Tisket a Tasket. I'm filling up my basket, which, again, not really a card sentiment, but they're so cute. And I'm thinking, I'm sending these to kids who aren't going to be super judgy and be like, oh, well, that doesn't really make sense, you know? So I said, you know, I'm gonna make one more card, and this time I'm taking extra pieces of that flower pattern paper instead of strips, because this card is facing the other direction. Because I'm using that Tisket Tasket strip there, I can't use words next to it because then they'd be facing the wrong way because all the words face the same way. So I just decided, let me look on my desk what little tiny scraps are left, and was able to find those little flower pieces and cut them down to size. Again, all I'm doing is just like placing things on in a bunch of different ways, flipping it over, changing the order to see what I like. And I didn't really like that green piece in the corner there. I just kind of wanted them all to be a little bit more multicolored. It seemed a little bit heavier on the pink, and I felt like the green like really stood out in a way that I didn't like. Plus, I mean, the Somebody Loves You, it's just so adorable. I could not use it, so I kind of like made that one work. And I'm going to scrape off the adhesive on that other green one and save that. So I'm going to add one last stitching detail to this very last card, and there you have 24 cards from one paper pad with very little extra supplies. Like, you really just need cardstock, the 6x6 pad, and a pen if you want it, and then of course adhesive. You have to glue it down. But I hope that this was helpful and that you enjoyed, and I thought for like a little fun thing, since I have just this tiny amount of stuff left from the paper pad, like what you see on screen is literally all that's left. I thought, wouldn't it be fun to send these last little journaling card bits to one of the viewers of the video? So if you would like just a little handful of journaling card bits that is left over, I will send them to you in a handmade card. Just leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought of this video. If you want to see more of these Doodlebug 6x6 pad, make a whole bunch of card videos, and what you thought of it. And then I will randomly select someone to send a handmade card and the little journaling bits too. So that is it for my card video today. Thank you for sticking along. I know it's a long video, but it's also a lot of cards packed in there. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more video tutorials, including big, videos like this where you see a whole bunch of cards in one, be sure to subscribe to my channel. And I will leave you links in the video description to the paper pad and the products that I use. And also in the video description is all of my different social media, so you can, follow me on Facebook and get some more inspiration there, etc., or Instagram. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it and hope this was helpful. Have an awesome day. Bye.